Here's a question that might blow your mind. What if I told you that by the time you hit your mid-40s, much of what you feel and experience is shaped by invisible social pressures you barely notice? That many of the struggles you face aren't just personal, they're reflections of the world around you? Welcome to The Social Lens. I'm your host, Beatrice Goodwin, and today we're diving into the social forces behind the midlife crisis. Why it happens, who it affects most, and how understanding these influences might help you find clarity and strength. Because here's the thing, what we call a midlife crisis isn't really about age. It's about waking up from a social story you didn't even realize you were living. Let me paint you a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Picture a mother driving her minivan to drop her kids off at school. She's navigating traffic, resolving arguments between her children, sipping her coffee, shifting gears, and helping her son blow his nose, all simultaneously. She's operating efficiently, smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. But here's what's really happening. Her body has memorized these tasks so thoroughly that she's essentially unconscious. She's functioning on autopilot, running programs she developed through thousands of repetitions. This is the reality for most of us by midlife. Psychological experts tell us that by our mid-30s, our identity is essentially locked in place. We've ingrained specific sets of behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, emotional reactions, habits, and perceptions that now operate subconsciously. But here's where it gets fascinating and a little disturbing. When you recall a highly charged emotional experience, your brain fires in exactly the same sequences and patterns as during the original event. You're literally rewiring those neural pathways to be stronger, more entrenched. You reproduce the same brain chemicals as if you were reliving the experience in real time, training your body to memorize that emotion. This creates a cycle, thinking and feeling and thinking, until both mind and body become conditioned into fixed automatic responses. We become capable of reliving past events repeatedly, potentially thousands of times throughout our lifetime. When the body remembers better than the conscious mind, effectively becoming the mind itself, we've formed what we call a habit. The result? We end up thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, reacting in the same ways, behaving identically, believing the same principles, and perceiving reality consistently. Our automatic programming includes everything from driving and brushing teeth to overeating when stressed, worrying about the future, judging friends, complaining about life, blaming parents, doubting ourselves, and maintaining chronic unhappiness. We become habitual, automatic beings, existing as the memory of ourselves. For 95% of our day, we function unconsciously. We merely appear to be awake. So what breaks this trance? What forces us back into consciousness? Midlife crisis is often portrayed as a predictable rite of passage, something that strikes suddenly when a certain age is reached. But real awakenings don't always follow the calendar. Sometimes they come crashing in through unexpected moments, forcing us to confront truths we've been avoiding. This is the story of Bob Pass, whose midlife transformation wasn't marked by a birthday, but by powerful, life-changing events that shattered his autopilot existence. In the early 1970s, Bob Pass was living the ultimate autopilot life. A successful trial attorney with the U.S. government's Federal Power Commission, he had everything figured out: career, trajectory, future plans. Then one day, he visited the National Zoo with his girlfriend. Standing at the Great Ape exhibit, watching the caged gorillas, Bob turned to her and said something that would change everything. "I know exactly how they feel." That moment of recognition, that visceral understanding of being trapped in his own life, shattered Bob's autopilot existence. It wasn't a gradual realization developed through months of therapy. It was an instant, shocking awareness that he was living in a cage of his own making. Bob didn't hesitate. He walked away from his legal career to clear his mind, traveling and giving tennis lessons at a country club. For the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely happy and fulfilled. But here's where Bob's story reveals something crucial about midlife awakening. He knew this lifestyle couldn't support his dreams of having a family. So, despite his newfound happiness, he put the suit back on and interviewed at a local law firm. The universe, it seems, had other plans. The interview was going well until Bob suddenly felt violently ill and had to leave. Within 48 hours, he was hospitalized with a staph infection in his heart valve, facing uncertainty about his survival. Lying in that hospital bed, confronting his own mortality, Bob had what he later called a forced confrontation with my life. The revelation was crystal clear. He despised being a lawyer. That brush with death wasn't just a medical crisis, it was life hitting the reset button on his autopilot existence. Bob turned down the secure legal position and established his tennis academy in 1973. Years later, he insisted it was the best decision he ever made. But notice this crucial detail. Bob's transformation wasn't tied to any birthday or calendar milestone. It was triggered by a significant life event. First, the recognition at the zoo, then amplified by his near-death experience. Bob's journey reminds us that midlife crises are not simply about age, they're about awareness. They arise when life's illusions fall away, revealing what truly matters. For Bob, those pivotal moments sparked a radical reinvention, proving that it's never too late to break free from the cages we build for ourselves and pursue a life of genuine fulfillment. Bob's story isn't unique. Research from 1994 proves that external disruptions are the secret sauce of successful life changes. When psychologists surveyed over 100 people attempting major transformations, career switches, relationship endings, lifestyle overhauls, they discovered something remarkable. Studies have shown that 36% of successful changes occurred when people moved homes, compared to only 13% of unsuccessful attempts following a move. Physical transitions create powerful disruptions that break us out of our autopilot patterns and motivate fresh starts. And it's not just major moves. Life changes can be triggered by getting a promotion or something as seemingly trivial as a change in your daily commute. These disruptions shake us out of our automatic patterns and create openings for conscious choice. Even small moments can act like wake-up calls, making us question routines and habits we barely noticed before. These triggers highlight the cracks in our autopilot mindset, inviting us to pause and reflect. Why are external triggers so powerful? Because our brains resist change when we're running on autopilot. Remember, 95% of our behavior is subconscious programming. To change that programming, we need something strong enough to interrupt the pattern and force us back into conscious awareness. This is why some people need dramatic wake-up calls: illness, job loss, divorce, death of a loved one. These events aren't punishment. They're circuit breakers for lives that have become too automatic to course correct on their own. But here's what the research reveals. Not everyone experiences these awakening moments equally. There's a hidden factor that dramatically influences who struggles most during midlife transitions. When researchers examined happiness data from the General Social Survey, they uncovered something unexpected about who actually experiences midlife crisis. The answer isn't what you'd expect. For middle-aged white Americans, overall life satisfaction remained stable until the late 1990s. Then dissatisfaction began rising sharply. But this wasn't happening across the board. It was concentrated almost entirely among those without bachelor's degrees. The gap between whites with and without college education has been widening steadily. Those without degrees report significantly higher levels of unhappiness, and this dissatisfaction has been climbing since the mid-1990s. Meanwhile, middle-aged African Americans showed a completely different pattern. Despite generally reporting lower happiness than whites initially, their well-being consistently improved over time until 2010. Even starting from a more challenging baseline, African American lives have been getting better in ways that simply aren't true for whites, particularly those with lower educational attainment. When researchers used Gallup's Ladder of Life question, Asking people to rate their lives from 0 to 10, the pattern became even clearer. Education matters more than race in determining life satisfaction. For Blacks without bachelor's degrees, self-reported life evaluations actually exceed those of whites after age 40. This pattern holds across multiple measures: physical pain, daily positive mood, stress levels. Education, not race, emerges as the primary dividing line for these daily experiences. The exception is stress levels, where Blacks report relatively lower stress than whites regardless of education. What this reveals is that midlife crisis isn't equally distributed. It's hitting hardest among those with fewer resources, educational, economic, and social, to navigate the transition. But why? What's happening in modern life that makes these transitions so much harder than they used to be? To understand the modern midlife crisis, we need to go back 2 million years. From the emergence of Homo sapiens until the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, human life revolved around intense physical exertion followed by rest. Our ancestors operated under feast or famine cycles, walking 5 to 10 miles daily just to secure food. Fast forward to today, our average energy expenditure per unit of body mass is less than 38% of Stone Age humans, while our caloric intake has dramatically increased. Even following the most rigorous government exercise guidelines, 30 minutes daily achieves less than half the energy expenditure our genes are optimized for. Here's the interesting part. This dramatic lifestyle change occurred in just the last century, while biological evolution takes tens of thousands of years to adapt. We're experiencing a fundamental mismatch between our genetically encoded needs and modern living conditions. Our genes are thrifty, designed to stockpile calories against potential famine. But now we're doing that stockpiling while living sedentary office lives. The result? Our bodies store excess energy as abdominal fat, that spare tire that can migrate to heart arteries, creating a direct link between our modern lifestyle and heart attacks. But the physical mismatch is only part of the problem. Modern stress isn't even caused by greater adversity. It's caused by information overload. The 24/7 news cycle keeps our amygdala, the brain's emotional center, in permanent high alert. We're drowning in negativity and chaos while telling ourselves we can manage it until suddenly we can't. When overwhelmed, we seek comfort in exactly the wrong places: alcohol, passive screen time, comfort foods loaded with simple carbohydrates and fats. Under stress, our bodies crave glucose, making that box of glazed donuts irresistible. And we're doing all this in isolation. Unlike our tribal ancestors, we lack deep social connections. In research labs, scientists induce stress in rats through social isolation. It activates stress hormones immediately. The same applies to humans. Social exclusion is a massive stressor and survival threat. In late 2015, 2 Princeton economists made a shocking announcement that changed how we understand midlife crisis in America. Ann Case and Angus Deaton discovered that death rates among middle-aged white Americans had increased for the first time since 1950. From 1998 to 2013, while every other ethnic group in America experienced declining mortality rates, middle-aged white Americans, specifically those aged 45 to 54 with less education, were dying in increasing numbers from suicide, drug overdoses, and alcohol-related liver disease. They called these deaths of despair, estimating that roughly 500,000 white Americans died who might still be alive if they had followed previous generations' positive mortality trends. Case emphasized these deaths were unnecessary. These are people who are taking their own lives, either slowly or quickly. The numbers are staggering. The mortality rate for middle-aged white Americans climbed from approximately 375 per 100,000 in the late 1990s to about 415 per 100,000 by 2013. Meanwhile, the UK's rate dropped from 330 per 100,000 to 260 per 100,000 over the same period. This reversal was unique to the United States. No other affluent country witnessed similar increases. The economists pointed to wage stagnation since the 1970s and limited safety nets compared to other Western nations, but acknowledged that similar economic challenges existed elsewhere without the same deadly outcomes. What makes this even more tragic is that historically marginalized groups, Black and Latino Americans, continued experiencing declining mortality rates during this same period. It was specifically middle-aged white Americans who were experiencing this unprecedented rise in deaths of despair. This represents the extreme end of midlife crisis. What happens when people can't find healthy ways to break out of their autopilot existence and lack the resources or knowledge to navigate the transition successfully. But there's hope. Research shows there are proven ways to navigate midlife transitions successfully. Herminia Ibarra, a professor at London Business School, spent years studying how people successfully reinvent their careers in midlife. Her findings challenge everything the career counseling industry tells us about finding our purpose. Ibarra tracked ambitious professionals, mainly in their 30s and 40s, across the United States, UK, and France. Each had followed linear career paths for at least 8 years before feeling the urge to change. She watched them navigate from initial dissatisfaction through unsettling transition periods to successful career transformations. Her central discovery revolutionizes how we think about midlife change. We learn who we are only through lived experiences, not introspection. The career quiz industry promises that self-reflection alone can reveal your perfect match. Ibarra argues this promotes premature pigeonholing while ignoring our capacity for growth and discovery. Frameworks offering definitive answers sell well because they provide the certainty we crave, but they sideline the dynamic nature of human potential. Instead of think then act, Ibarra advocates act then think. We're composed of numerous possibilities that we unlock through action, trying new activities, expanding networks, finding new role models. Self-discovery happens through experimentation, not contemplation. Consider her research subjects. Pierre, a 38-year-old psychiatrist and best-selling author, became a Buddhist monk after meeting a Tibetan Lama at a dinner party. Lucy, a 46-year-old tech manager, was jolted by critical feedback that led her to hire an organizational development consultant as her coach. Through this guidance, she realized her passion lay in managing people, not technology, transforming what she considered a weakness into her greatest strength. The common pattern across successful transitions. Professionals felt unfulfilled, encountered a previously invisible world, began short-term explorations, initially resisted abandoning long-term plans, but found that the more they explored, the clearer change became necessary. New professional identities evolved through temporary engagements and reflection, not overnight revelations. Some became wealthier, others less so. But like the findings from the famous Freakonomics coin flip study, they were ultimately happier post-change. Paul Graham, co-founder of Y Combinator, the startup incubator behind Airbnb, Dropbox, and Stripe, echoes this in advice he wrote for high school graduates. Rather than working backward from a predefined goal, consider current promising situations and choose options that expand future possibilities. Instead of asking, "What should I do now to get there?" a question rooted in long-term planning. Graham and Ibarra recommend evaluating present opportunities and selecting those that offer the broadest range of future options. This experiential approach aligns with what researchers call being a scientist of yourself, posing smaller, testable questions like, which of my various possible selves should I start to explore now? How can I do that? But experimentation alone isn't enough. One of the most crucial distinctions for navigating midlife successfully is understanding the difference between passion and purpose. Passion is individualistic. It energizes, but can isolate us because my passion might not resonate with yours. Purpose, however, can be shared collectively and has the power to unify people around common goals. Amy Wrzesniewski at Yale opposes the idea that purpose is a predestined calling waiting to be discovered. Instead, she believes it must be cultivated and developed over time through conscious effort and reflection. Adam Grant's research with lifeguards proves the transformative power of connecting to purpose. He divided 32 lifeguards into two groups. The personal benefit group read stories about future career advantages, while the meaning group read stories about lifeguards saving lives. The results were dramatic. The meaning group voluntarily signed up for 43% more working hours in subsequent weeks. Their supervisors, unaware of the intervention, rated them 21% higher in helping behaviors. The personal benefit group showed no improvement in either measure. This transformation came from just 30 minutes of connecting work to its deeper meaning. Similar interventions work across fields. Radiologists improved accuracy when shown patient photos alongside X-rays. Nurses assembling surgical kits worked 64% longer and reduced errors by 15% after meeting caregivers who used those kits. Purpose isn't limited to life-saving roles. Every job has underlying purpose that can be discovered by persistently asking, why? Consider a hospital janitor. Why do you clean rooms? Because my boss tells me to. Why? To keep rooms from getting dirty. Why does that matter? It makes rooms more sanitary and pleasant. Why does that matter? It keeps patients healthy and happy. Suddenly, janitorial work becomes a contribution to patient health and happiness. One janitor Wrzesniewski studied would engage lonely patients in conversation, significantly enhancing their emotional well-being, an act not on any task sheet but integral to his deeper purpose. Purpose fuels above and beyond behaviors, inspiring people to transcend job descriptions. At Sharp Hospital, reconnecting employees with meaning led to remarkable actions. When a cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy wanted to host her pregnant daughter-in-law's baby shower but couldn't leave the hospital, staff arranged the entire event within the hospital walls. Understanding your contribution elevates work from mundane tasks to meaningful endeavor. This shift in perspective can transform not just your career, but your entire experience of daily life. So how do we practically apply these insights? Two Stanford professors offer a design thinking approach to crafting well-lived, joyful lives through a simple but powerful framework. They propose evaluating how full your tanks are in 4 critical areas: love, work, health, and play. This assessment helps identify which aspects of your life need attention. Play, defined as activity that brings joy simply for doing it, is often the emptiest tank for midlife adults. When was the last time you did something purely because it brought you joy, not because it served some other purpose? The power of this reflection was demonstrated by someone who realized their play tank was completely empty. Taking breaks from screens and devices forced stillness, giving their brain rare opportunities to breathe and generate new ideas. During such moments, they asked, "What is something I've always said I wanted to do but supposedly don't have time for?" The answer: learning guitar. They'd had one gathering dust for 2 decades, a gift from their grandmother. The realization that they likely had more time than they thought, they just needed to reclaim it from automatic behaviors like endless scrolling, led them to sign up for adult guitar lessons. But here's where most people go wrong. They set corporate-style goals that strip away intrinsic motivation. Lose 10 pounds in 2 months is a classic example. Arbitrary, numerical, lacking meaningful milestones. Instead, restore the milestones. Elevate your efforts. Go a week without using elevators. Enjoy specific rewards after periods of discipline. Create frequent victories rather than distant targets. Make the ultimate destination intrinsically motivating. Fitting into my sexy black pants without gastrointestinal distress transforms weight loss from mundane daily weigh-ins into a playful quest. For building skills or changing careers, replace vague development goals with specific achievements. Turn around a struggling project, receive compliments for running worthwhile meetings, solve challenges through collaboration, contribute ideas that get adopted. These milestones indicate various ways to build capabilities and demonstrate value. When achieved, they deserve celebration, moments of elevation that create peak experiences. The Boy Scouts understand this well. Their Merit Badge program presents badges at courts of honor, where Scouts are recognized before peers, creating peak experiences. Similarly, karate students earning belts often receive them at public ceremonies. Hitting milestones evokes pride and should be celebrated. These moments of elevation, along with managing the pits and transitions of life, are natural defining moments that deserve extra attention. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the landscape of midlife awakening. What have we learned? First, that what we call midlife crisis isn't really about age. It's about awakening from a trance we didn't know we were in. By our mid-30s, 95% of our behavior runs on autopilot, and breaking free requires significant disruption. Second, these disruptions aren't punishments, they're opportunities. Whether it's Bob Pass seeing himself in those caged gorillas, or illness forcing a confrontation with mortality, or simply changing your commute. These moments create openings for conscious choice. Third, not everyone navigates these transitions equally. Education, social connection, and access to resources dramatically influence outcomes. Understanding this helps us be more compassionate with ourselves and others during difficult transitions. Fourth, our modern lifestyle creates stress-body mismatches our ancestors never faced. Recognizing this helps us make conscious choices about physical activity, stress management, and social connection rather than defaulting to comfort behaviors that make things worse. Fifth, the extreme end of midlife crisis, deaths of despair, represents what happens when people lack healthy ways to break out of autopilot existence. This isn't dramatic overstatement. It's a public health crisis demanding attention and resources. Sixth, successful career and life transitions happen through experimentation, not introspection. We don't need to know our calling. We need to start trying things and pay attention to what energizes us. Seventh, purpose trumps passion for sustainable fulfillment. While passion can isolate, purpose connects us to something larger than ourselves and fuels extraordinary effort and satisfaction. Finally, design thinking applied to life creates structures for sustainable change. By consciously filling our tanks and creating meaningful milestones, we transform life from something that happens to us into something we actively craft. The research reveals that midlife awakening isn't a crisis to be solved. It's an opportunity to be seized. It's the moment when we can choose conscious living over automatic programming, purpose over mere passion, experimentation over false certainty, connection over isolation. Remember Susan's words. When she exercises regularly, it replaces whatever craving drives her to seek comfort in wine or food. It frees me up to think beyond that and look to the future. That's what Breaking the Autopilot does. It frees us to think beyond our conditioned patterns and look toward a future we consciously create rather than unconsciously inherit. Bob Pass, standing at that zoo, recognizing himself in those caged gorillas, represents all of us at some crucial moment. The question isn't whether we'll face this moment of recognition, it's what we'll do when it arrives. Will we return to the cage of our autopilot existence, or will we use the disruption to design something better? The choice, as always, is ours. But now we know we have one. Thanks for joining me for The Social Lens. If today's exploration resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own moments of recognition and the experiments they've sparked. Remember, you're not broken if you're questioning your life. You're waking up. And that's the first step toward designing something better. Until next time, stay conscious.